Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to show you guys how to install UnRAID on your QNAP NAS. Maybe you've got an old QNAP NAS knocking around that you've had for a few years that's well outside of the hardware warranty, or you're someone that's already utilised UnRAID for a number of years and quite like the kind of low resource management of servers it provides. And in today's video I'm going to show you how to repurpose your QNAP hardware to use UnRAID. But a few disclaimers straight off the bat. Number one, what I'm showing you today, it will, all intent and purposes, potentially invalidate your warranty with QNAP. And although this whole thing I'm going to show you today is completely reversible, there is no denying that you are now utilising the system they are offering you in a different way to which they support and intend it. And it can lead to your system not being supported by the brand. So I do recommend doing this on old systems are already outside of that support, and you're not going to be going for a newer system or continuing to use QTS, because bear in mind that once again you can reverse this, but you're not going to be able to interact with the data within your data sets there within the QNAP ecosystem there. Another thing I will highlight is you have to run this on a QNAP that has an HDMI output and an x86 based processor. Now the really annoying thing is you're only going to need that HDMI output very briefly, maybe later down the line for troubleshooting, but you need it at the beginning for approximately 2 minutes. But those 2 minutes make all the difference, something I'll show you later on there. So it's worth bearing in mind that although UnRAID can run on incredibly modest hardware, you need to use a QNAP NAS that has an HDMI output, and therefore it has to be a QNAP NAS that has at least a dual to quad core x86 based processor from the likes of Intel, or an AMD processor that has Vega graphics on board. Very, very important. It's going to be a bunch of stuff we're going to download. So what do we need? Well, we need a QNAP NAS, already mentioned. We're also going to need a USB keyboard. Again, you're not going to need it for long. You're only going to need it briefly towards the beginning, but you're going to need a USB keyboard that you can connect to your QNAP NAS. You're also going to need a USB drive. Now, normally at this point, I would recommend this drive, the SanDisk 32 gig USB that I've used for all of my installations. Covering UnRAID, TrueNAS, already did some Proxmox stuff recently. However, for reasons that will become clear later that I'm going to include in the video, this might not be the USB for you. I'd still recommend it, but you may encounter a problem that I'm going to emulate later on in the video that this USB may encounter with regards to the installation, and I'm going to show you a workaround. But just be aware that when you do buy the USB, the way UnRAID works, that it runs from the USB drive, so it doesn't run within the system. The result is certain USB drives within the USB creator tool from UnRAID have been flagged as yes and no, and because a whole multitude of moody SSDs have appeared online from sites like AliExpress and eBay, some SSDs that have tried to clone SanDisk drives have resulted in a flag list within the USB creator tool, and unfortunately some genuine SanDisk drives have been affected by that. And this isn't just SanDisk, loads of other USB drives have been hit by this. So really I can't actually recommend a USB drive directly, because some of them may appear on that flagged list, and therefore you need a workaround, which I'll show you later, to use them. But I just wanted to let you guys know that this is the one I am using, linked in the description below. And lastly, you're going to need a monitor, again only for a few minutes, to create the direct keyboard video mouse interface for you to do one particular setting within the QNAP later. I don't have a monitor because I'm going to be utilizing a capture card that allows me to show you guys and record all the steps of the installation today, because bear in mind you're going to need a keyboard, you're going to need a USB, and you're going to need an HDMI monitor, or at least a capture card, to connect with your local machine. But for now, what we're going to do is head over to my desktop here, running OBS here in the background. So I'm going to move the microphone there so you can hear me a bit better. I'm really sorry about the background noise in today's video. I've got all kinds of fans and assisted systems running here in the background. And as you can see here on screen, we've got the UnRAID OS download page here, UnRAID themselves. And again, I'll link to this page in the description, along with how to sign up for the Pro class membership with them. Get your USB and connect it into your local system there. Double check OBS running in there in the background. As you can see, it's going to, just see that drive there. But if we go into the PC menu there, you'll see that the USB drive has not appeared on there. And that is because it's not formatted. Now, this is going to be a very important point later on. But if your drive has got formatted partition, if it's got existing partitions on it or data, not only will you lose that data, but you're going to have to delete all of those partitions. But I'll get onto that later on. So there's two things that we're going to download here. We may not need both of them, but I just wanted to highlight them. First and foremost, we're going to need to download the tool for Windows. Just click there and you'll immediately download the USB tool there. It's very small and I'm going to cancel it. You don't need to, but it's only because I've already downloaded this tool for us. The other thing we may need later, and I'll refer to it later on, is downloaded the latest version of the UnRAID image there. But again, you may not need it. I just want to come back to that later on. So keep that tab open. Another thing maybe for later on is Rufus, but we'll get onto that later on. And of course, finding a USB key as mentioned. Although I'm running this USB key today, we are going to encounter problems that I'll show you later on. But there are others out there. But unfortunately, there isn't really a whitelist available from UnRAID on those USBs. So head into your download section and find that download for the UnRAID USB creator you used earlier. Right click and make sure you run as an administrator. You may see a black screen there for you guys. It's just asking for admin rights to be given. And the first thing it's going to do is check the versions of UnRAID that are out there. As you can see, UnRAID 6.1.1.5. It'll ask you if you want to go for the stable release, a local zip, that sort of thing, and allow you to either download the local file, much like you saw on that download list, or allow you to download the stable release. Next, you can name your server, so we're just going to leave it the name Tower, but you can change it appropriately. Again, whether you want this to be a static or a dynamic IP for your server, leave it as dynamic for now. You can change this from within the UnRAID user interface. And you want to make sure it is a boot drive there, very, very important. However, you may already have noticed the word incompatible there. And this goes back to what I mentioned earlier on, with some USB drives unfortunately being flagged, even if they are genuine. Now, if your USB device is being listed as absolutely fine and dandy, you can go ahead, click right, and then it will transfer over the UnRAID installation onto that USB, and then you can disconnect it safely and proceed to the next part of the installation. I'm sure it's on the time bar. But if the USB is being flagged as incompatible, don't worry, there are ways around this. And in order to do that, that is where those other two tools mentioned earlier come in. So go back to that UnRAID page and download the latest version. Just click there, and then the latest version will begin downloading there in the background. Again, I'm going to cancel it. You don't need to. Let it download there in the background. The next thing you're going to need is Rufus. This is a tool for initializing, formatting, and creating bootable USB drives there. You can go ahead and download the portable version of Rufus here. Again, you can go for a portable instant deploy or a full installer there at the bottom. Just click and it will download. Then, from within your local machine, go into the download section, and the first thing you need to do is run that Rufus application. Again, you'll be asked for your admin rights, as you saw a black screen there, and then in the middle of the screen will be the Rufus Manager here. Now, select this option here and just go to Free DOS or Non-Bootable as the option. From there, the format options will appear, and this will allow you to format that drive to FAT32. Now, you can do this, let's remove that updater, you can do this from within the Windows menu here by right-clicking a drive or using Disk Part or the Disk Management area to add a drive for visibility if you choose. But if your drive is larger than 32 gigabytes, then FAT32 formatting isn't supported natively, and that's where that Rufus tool comes in. So what you need to do is, where it says under volume label, type the word UnRAID all in capitals, no spaces, not in the middle, not before or after. Then make sure FAT32 has been selected. Then at the bottom, click Start. It will warn you that it will format that drive, but now it's going to format that little USB drive to FAT32. As you can see, now it's appeared as one of our available drives because it's been formatted, given a drive letter and an identity there. So next thing we need to do is close Rufus, and earlier we downloaded the latest version of UnRAID, didn't we, as a zip. Right click and select the option to extract. If you're using WinRAR, select Open with WinRAR, or if you're using standard Windows extraction, you can go ahead and use the Windows extraction tool if you choose. But for me, I'm going to extract files. Now from here, you need to select that USB that you just created and formatted there. In my case, drive letter E. If you don't know which letter it is, go into the computer settings there and double check the identity of it. Make sure it is directly into the directory of the USB. No subdirectories, no subfolders, otherwise the UnRAID installation and bootloader won't work. Select E and then select OK. From this point, it's now extracting the latest version of UnRAID onto that USB. You're effectively manually doing the thing that the USB creator would have done for you. And now it's going to extract it onto that USB and then close when it's completed. When it's done, any moment now. Once that's done, you can head back into the list of available drives. And if you go in, you'll see that now you've got a whole list of information there. But the thing we need to do now is change the name of this folder. This is really important in order to make the drive bootable. So where it says EFI dash, delete the dash. Then allow that to continue as you see there. Then safely remove the drive by going to here, right clicking, and then eject SanDisk. I've realized now while I'm doing that my face is in the way, but you get the picture. Just make sure that you safely remove the USB. From there, what we're going to do is switch over to the HDMI output. Let's put that there. And we'll leave that there on screen, because what I'm going to do now is take our USB drive. You then connect it to the rear of the QNAP in one of the available USB ports. Also make sure before you power up the QNAP that you've connected a network cable and you've connected the USB keyboard there. If you've got any hard drives inside that have got QNAP, again, data sets within QTS, I recommend removing those drives to stop yourself from accidentally deleting them later, unless you're going to reuse those drives, in which case leave them inside the system. When you're all connected and set up, so again, you've got your HDMI monitor, you've got your USB keyboard, you've connected your USB key, and you've connected the power and the Ethernet, the network to your QNAP NAS, press the power button. The NAS will begin to boot up. Which it's doing now. It's just doing its checks. And then from here, this is the only time you'll need the keyboard, the video, and the mouse, if you've got one, is just spam the delete or F12 key. Now the reason we're doing this is because we need to get into the BIOS settings of this NAS. We need it to be able to see the background of this NAS in order to stop the QNAP booting from the regular internal SSD that boots the QTS software. So what normally happens when you boot the QNAP NAS is by default it boots from the small 5 GB SSD that's inside every QNAP NAS. This is what contains the QNAP software. If you've got an existing QNAP installation in place, it will then boot it from that USB. If there are no drives inside, it will initialize the QNAP NAS for first time setup. But what we want to do is now go into, now we've got into our BIOS option via the HDMI output with our keyboard, is we want to go to the boot tab with left and right on the keyboard, go down, and where it says boot option 1, QNAP OS, press return and then select USB. Now what that means is next time this system boots, it will boot from the USB, which is what we want it to do because UnRAID runs from that USB. Now in the event that you remove that USB, what will happen is the system next time it boots will check for the USB, it won't find the USB, and then it will go through the rest of the boot order and then boot from the QNAP OS. Now, if you're worried about the USB being accidentally disconnected, or that you've disconnected the USB at any point and you've reconnected it and you're worried about the USB's identity and you don't want it to boot into the QNAP OS and potentially reinitialize your drives, you can go ahead and disable the QNAP flash module inside, and that will avoid the system entirely booting into QNAP's OS and potentially overwriting the data on your drive sets. However, just remember that if you want to reverse today's process, so later on you've played with UnRAID and you've thought, no, I've had enough, I want to go back to QNAP QTS, just remember that 1, you need to re-enable the QNAP OS and make sure to change the boot order back to the QNAP one first, and that will allow you to reverse anything you've done today to the QNAP and get it to go back into booting QTS. But just remember, this system will almost certainly be taking logs, and in the event of a support query with QNAP, this could potentially undermine support they provide to you as you're using it outside of that remit. Sorry to be repetitious, but it's important. But I'm going to go ahead and select USB boot module there, and I'm going to disable the QNAP internal flash memory module there. So now we're good to go. We can right click and you can either save changes and exit, or you can just immediately boot into that USB if you choose. For me, I'm going to save changes and exit, and that will make the system reboot and go ahead and boot from our USB. And as you can see, there we are on screen. So now we can choose that we want the system to boot into the UnRAID OS. And there you go. Now every other step in this process can be conducted from your web browser. You don't need the keyboard anymore, you don't need the HDMI output, but you do need to keep that USB inside the system. Just remember that if you want to reverse any of the stuff we've done today, you'll need to get back into BIOS, which means you'll need a keyboard and that HDMI output. UnRAID will load very quickly indeed, and eventually via the HDMI output, not only will it boot in, but it will also tell you the identity and the IP that the device is running on there. I'm going to remove that keyboard over there while we wait for the system to boot up, and then from there what we'll do when we get into the UnRAID system is I'll show you just some of the early steps with regards to setting up your UnRAID server for the first time. As you can see, it's now finished the boot. We've got our new IP address there appearing on screen, and if we choose to, we can continue interacting over this HDMI output. We don't really want to do that, do we? We want to access the device over the network, and then from there start configuring UnRAID. So let's switch over to my desktop here and the web browser. Now, one thing I should have mentioned earlier is that if you have set this device up and you want to initialize and go into it, and you didn't make a note of the IP during the setup or during some of the early steps, what you can use is a tool that I regularly recommend here on the channel known as Advanced IP Scanner. It allows you to scan your local area network and give you the identity of all the other devices on your network and whether you can access them. As you can see, there is our connected QNAP NAS running UnRAID, and it allows us to get our IP. So there is the initial login there, the username root, and we've got to give ourselves a password. So we'll go with that one there. Switching between 3 different keyboards, go ahead and then set your password, and there you go. You're now logged in to UnRAID for the first time running on our QNAP NAS server there. You've used your old turnkey NAS and turned it into an UnRAID server. Now, again, when you use UnRAID for the first time, you can use it for free for a month, and even some of the less exciting services are available in even the free version. But still, nonetheless, you will need to go ahead with a purchase key if you want to use it beyond that 30-day trial, although the trial is the full version. There should be a link in the description if you do want to sign up, because using that link below results in a small kickback coming here to the channel and allows us to keep making these videos. But for now, what you can do is go ahead and start the trial if you choose, but on top of that, when you're ready to start your main share, the good news is that all of the disks within the NAS are already connected to the UnRAID system, and it has access to it thanks to the MOBO and the BIOS. that you can start creating those data sets if you choose, and go ahead and start adding those new pools with all of the connected devices there whenever you see fit. And as you can see on the dashboard, we've got full access to all of the analytical information of our UnRAID server, access to all of the memory, and ultimately utilizing the full QNAP hardware for our new UnRAID server. Once again, all the things in today's video are reversible, but just remember that every action you make on these systems will inevitably be reflected on the log. So do bear that in mind if you're going to do anything like this, or it could invalidate your support. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember, there are links to all of the assets I've talked about today, alongside, hopefully coming soon, the full breakdown and guide over on NAS Compares, written out in full with all of the screenshots and the links for you to utilize. So do recommend you check that out. Sorry about the background noise throughout this video. I've got a laptop fan, I've got all kinds of stuff happening right now. Ignore that issue there with the drive. I believe one of my drives failed a smart test a week ago, but we're still keeping it here just for demonstration purposes, so don't worry. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and apart from that, subscribe, like, etc., and I'll see you next time.